G'day and welcome back. I'm Lance from Motive Power. If you've seen our previous video on Ventrax, you'll know that we have a rather unloved farm that needs a lot of attention. We have a lot of lantana scrub to clear, and today we're going to talk about some of the key tools we use to do that. We're going to talk about Husqvana battery saws. We have 5 years of experience with these Husqvana saws now. And if you think battery saws are toys, well, you're wrong, because these Husqvana units have done a damn fine job. Now you might wonder, why battery saws when there's plenty of good petrol saws around? Well, we were working in a remote property. We didn't want to be traipsing into town to get fuel, didn't want to be carrying fuel, and we had a small solar setup. So the idea was that we would use the solar setup with its arc pack and a gel battery to charge the chainsaw batteries. And that worked really well. A normal big battery would, however, only cope with one charge of one of these big Husqvana batteries. More about them in a minute. And eventually we killed our main gel battery from overly discharging it multiple times. Operator error. But we've stuck with the battery saws because they're just easy. You can pick them up, turn them on, and away you go. In fact, my wife is quite handy with using them. No pull starts to worry about, no carburetors to worry about. There's a few little quirks, but they're good, reliable machines. We've used an array of Husqvana gear to clear our lantana jungle and all the saplings within it. And here is the array in front of me. You need to understand that all of our timber is Australian eucalypt. It's all hardwood, and bloody hard hardwood at that. Mainly for us, spotted gum, fair bit of stringy bark and iron bark as well, and a few other varieties, and of course the occasional lantana tree. So none of the work is easy. And if you're a greenie watching this, bemoaning the loss of trees, well, very few official trees went, and all the clearing works was done in accordance with the local laws. So we haven't been bad people. We've just been trying to get rid of noxious weeds and get the pastures back to what they should be. They're all native pastures too, by the way. So we started out with this one, 536 LIXP. And this has done a lot of timber. But it's retired now. I had a wind shift as I was cutting a back cut. And the tree came backwards over the saw, bent the bar, and delivered a big blow to the saw, and it was never the same again. Very sad. We can use it, but there's a problem with the electrical contacts. They're not quite where they should be now, and we don't want to burn out electrical contacts, particularly on good batteries. So, great saw, done a lot of work, but he's now retired. And it, by the way, has got a 14-inch bar. We'll put it to one side. The next one, right here, was a 535 IXP. It's essentially the same saw. It's about the same size, performs about the same, and has also done a considerable amount of timber. Again, a 14-inch bar. Works really well. Anything up to about 8 inches. Above that, either of these saws starts to struggle. And although they can do big timber and have done big timber, probably about 20 inch, it's a bit of a hard task. But great saw, it's still our backup saw today. So we'll put the 535 aside for a moment. And here is the current favourite. This is the 540 IXP. In Australia, it's sold with a 14-inch bar because they think Australian timbers are tougher. I believe in America it's sold with a 16-inch bar. We were fairly confident it'd do well, so this one's actually been fitted with a 16-inch, and it hums. It's about 25% faster and 25% more torque than the previous saws, and it's chalk and cheese. You would pick up this saw at any time. The longer bar also means I don't have to bend over as far when I'm cutting logs on or near the ground. This has a display on it that shows the battery charge, which is really useful. The batteries themselves have a little push button and a LED display, but if you're wearing gloves, and you should be doing this work, it's very awkward to get to that button. It's very difficult to get right on it. So again, this saw is done up to 20-inch, which is considerably bigger than the bar. That's hard work on the operator too, but this saw does it reasonably well, whereas the other saws really struggle. All of our batteries are the big buggers, the biggest you can get before you go to the backpack batteries. So this is a BLI 300. Now, on these sorts of saws, if I'm just cutting, if I've got a pile of logs and I'm just going flat out, cutting them up into firewood, this battery lasts about half an hour. Of course, we'd like it to be longer, but it does an awful lot of work in that half an hour. If we're clearing, scrub, so we're cutting, putting saw down, moving a bit, cutting a bit more, doing something else, cutting a bit more, that'll last 3 hours. So 2 batteries will get us through the day. We have 4 batteries, that's 2 hours of pure cutting. The batteries are flat by then, and I'm stuffed too. So don't bother with the smaller batteries unless you just want to use it in your backyard garden for very light work, in which case you wouldn't be using the 540, you'd be back on one of the other saws. As for chargers, well, this is the big one, and it's a QC 500. That's basically as big as they come. It will charge one of those big batteries in an hour. 3/4 of it, 3/4 charge in about half an hour, and of course the last quarter takes a lot longer. This is our third QC 500. The first one died just outside of the warranty period. The second one lingered a couple more years, and now 5 years on we have a third. Don't know why they died, not happy that they died, but life's a bitch. Because of shortages in the COVID period, we also have the dinky little charger, which is I can't even see a number on it. Yeah, I can't see it. Anyway, that one takes probably 3 or 4 hours to do it. The QC 500 will charge 3 batteries in the time it takes this one to charge 1. But hey, this was actually available on the shelf when the first 2 of these died. We had to wait for this one. So the manuals say that every 3 times you change a battery, you should fill the oil tank, the bar oil. That's not the case here. When you need to change a battery that's this size, you need to fill up with oil. So the manual isn't really up to speed with how these saws can work. And I think that's probably a common theme. I don't think Husqvana realised just how capable these saws were going to be and just how much hard work they can do. And probably didn't really expect people to keep using big batteries in them. So let's talk about issues. There's only a couple. On all 3 saws, these felling dogs, bumper spikes, whatever you want to call them, are near useless. They're too short, too small, don't come far enough down the saw, and it's a real problem when you're felling. 2 things happen. You get a lot of thick bark here, or loose bark, and the dogs aren't long enough to go through them. And not having a low one makes felling more difficult, because that's where you want one to be able to bite into the tree and pivot around. I've tried to find one aftermarket and I can't. It's a real disappointment. Mr. Husqvana, you need to fix this, and someone needs to make aftermarket ones, because this is the biggest disappointment of all. There's also a bit of dumb design. On all three saws, the oil tanks have the same sort of cap. That's not a problem. But this is a surround around the oil cap that's quite close, a millimetre or two. So when you pull the cap out, all the dirt and sawdust and garbage that's collected in that gap falls into your oil. It's a problem. It's caused a problem on this 540. We had to originally get an oil pump changed under warranty, then it failed again because it sucked in a bit of sawdust. I try really hard to keep this area clean, but it's nigh on impossible, and it's a bit of dumb design by people that don't quite understand the circumstances and what these saws go through. So we have another piece of Husqvana gear we use on the farm, and that's this beast. And I always forget what their numbers are. 536 LIRX. This is a brush cutter. The clamp has failed here, probably from misuse, but this machine has seen an awful lot of work, and it still keeps on ticking, does a really good job. But when we bought it, it was a big disappointment. It's called a brush cutter. It's marketed as a brush cutter. The literature says it's a brush cutter. You get the manual and it says it's just for grass. What do? That's false advertising in my book. Back to the Husqvana shop. We ended up throwing away the three-fingered grass blade, the useless thing that came with this brush cutter. And now it has a carbide tipped circular saw-like blade. This thing cuts anything. There's even a big groove in our front farm gate in the steel from where this thing hit the pipework. Fantastic. The whole brush cutter is amazing, providing it's got a decent blade on it. And the one that comes with it ain't good enough. And as a brush cutter, 5 years in, amazing amount of heavy work. This has hit so many rocks, logs, stumps and so forth, and it just keeps on going, both the saw and the brush cutter itself. So we can really recommend it. This thing, with one of those big batteries, will last at least half a day, perhaps a whole day, depending on whether the grass is this high or knee high. Would not be without it. Bit awkward with the harness and so forth, but works really well. So to finish off, if you're thinking about this sort of gear, like we were 5 years ago, and you're wondering whether it's robust and reliable enough, let me tell you, it is. We do very little maintenance on any of this gear. We do, sharpen chains and clean out oilways and so forth. But fundamentally, it just keeps on working. The service we get here from the local Husqvana dealer at Hunter Outdoor Equipment is great. Nothing's a trouble, and the pricing is reasonable. So from that side too, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It isn't cheap, particularly when you add in big batteries. But damn if it doesn't work, and it just keeps on going. I guess we would have liked Husqvana to have a little more in the range of accessories to support it. We take care to look after our batteries. One of the things we've done is make a crate to hold them all, and a few tools and chains and so forth on the side. This sort of gear isn't available from Husqvana. They have a couple of bags for smaller batteries, but when you get to the big end of town, they don't. So that's a disappointment, but it's something we've overcome fairly quickly. We have had problems of supply in a post-COVID world, but I think that's probably just the way things are. The reason we've got a small charger is we couldn't find stock of a big charger anywhere. So it may be something to be aware of. We generally try and have a backup of things. That's why 2 battery chargers, at least 2 saws, more than 2 batteries. Whatever basically goes wrong, you've got a fallback. That's particularly useful if the weather's closing in on you or something and you need to get a job done. So if you're wondering whether you can get away with a battery saw, whether you should go petrol, if you're going to be consistently running the saw all day, go for petrol. If it's an intermittent thing and you don't need a bar this long, battery is a viable alternative. We have no complaints and no concerns after having bought this gear, and we would do so again. And in fact, we have done twice. We've bought new saws. And to be honest, if there was a bigger, fancier, more powerful saw again, I'd probably get it. So if you think you might like to consider battery saws, consider Husqvana. They work damn well.